for example, which is which is the reason why green politics has been slow coming to Germany, because everyone who knew Hitler was green had to die first. And so, you know, the first two syllables of conservative is the same as conservation. I mean, and so they're not that far off. But I think what we've got to do is to identify, you know, what is it that we can do that's not going to cost a lot, that's going to that society is going to allow us to do, that we can then cast in terms of jobs, and what can we do to make the shift easier? I mean, the thing that bothers me about there's several things bothered me about the Bush administration. One of them was there were more drunk driving tickets on the ticket than people. Apparently Cheney had a lot. It's a mystery he was still driving. But it's not so much that they were even Republicans. I think the issue is bigger than that. There's this dance is going to go on, whether whoever's in charge. The trouble is they were oil men. They were oil Republicans. What we want is the sort of Republicans who were bribing Tommy Thompson to widen Highway 12. Right? You want concrete Republicans. Because those, in order to put up windmills, you need a lot of concrete. I mean, if you want to go green and renewable, you want to catch all the waves off the Pacific. You ever been out to San Francisco? You drive out around the Pacific, and then nothing, and then Pacifica, and then nothing, nothing. I mean, nothing for 30, 40 miles, you know? You know what we're going to have to do? Cover it with concrete. So that you can get flumes, and right? I mean, there's an infrastructure in going green which is much bigger than anything you could ever imagine. See, so, I mean, when it comes time to trash the United States military in order to build the windmills in the last-ditch stand, a Democrat could never get away with that. It takes a Republican. Only Nixon can go to China. See, so those are the sorts of things I mean by saying getting real. What is feasible? And what can we do to improve the path that we take that is feasible? And don't waste energy on things that are infeasible, like getting the general public to behave responsibly. No, that won't do that. Yeah.
So your point about the infrastructure of green really goes back to what you were talking about earlier with high and low quality materials.
Yes.
Because oil
is high quality, and actually therefore does remarkably little damage because it's so focused.
Right, because you're pulling out
green is much
incredibly energy, or this stuff with incredible energy density of
50,
a tiny little hole.
Yeah.
And in order to get the same amount of energy or power out of solar arrays, you have to have huge road infrastructure.
I mean, they're not going to do it, but New York State was going to get the Canadians to flood an area up by James Bay. There was, you know, James Bay's that little nipple on the bottom of the Hudson, right? They were going to flood an area next week that big. I mean, Jesus, the ecological damage there is huge.
To do what? Or
to get hydropower.
Ah, okay.
Right? Hydropower. I mean, and hydropower is actually not that bad because all you do is stick a dam in there and gravity and water does it for you. But windmills, you've got to build every damn one. So all of a sudden, motor car creation in Detroit's not going to happen. They're going to have to move to North Dakota and do windmill repair. You know, they're probably not going to be happy about that. But we need to sort of begin to set those sorts of shifts up as best we can. Yeah, Mr. Chan.
Well, I mean, but also, I mean, the ecological cost of building a dam is pretty big. But also, what about situations in which you actually get something ecological out of that, like the restoration of a lot of species to the bottom of the Grand Canyon after they put up the dam, because it actually took all the cold water out of the bottom of the lake and started to recool it down back to, you know, a temperature that allowed a lot of formerly endangered species to make comebacks. Yeah. I mean, technically, I'm being a conservationalist, but like that's
you can and you can't.
I know
you can't trust the Army Corps of Engineers. Those bastards, when they were building the Kickapoo Dam, the guys high up in that institution were buying real estate that was going to be next to where the lake was. And the remarkable thing is, who stopped that? Richard Nixon, the last environmental president we had. So, I mean, and Yeah, you're right. They were saying all sorts of things like recreation and that and that. No, I mean, you do a proper analysis of that, you wouldn't need to be Jesus Christ to walk across that lake in August. I mean, the Reynolds number was going to be way up. so that's the difficulty with these big, large systems. As you move upscale, you really can't tell what's going to happen. There's plenty of doubt. But, develop strategies for dealing with it. Did I answer your question?
More or less, yeah. I mean, what I was trying to say is that when the oil runs out, it's really,
the oil won't run out. It'll just get more expensive.
When the oil gets to the point that it is no longer economically feasible to use it as a primary source.
Yeah, and we're more or less at that point now.
We're getting there.
Well, what you have is you have an average return. Mm-hmm. How much do you get? Can't get it, can get it, running out. Mm-hmm. That's not the curve that gets you. There's another curve, which is the marginal return. How much extra do you get for the extra effort? So when this sucker's at 45 degrees, that one's flat, and that's when people get pissed off. Mm. The Spaniards took only 1/3 of the gold out of the New World. I mean, all systems stop at about 1/3. We've taken about 1/3 of the oil in the world south. The rest of it's just too expensive.
Mm. But because once that's gone, I mean, the amount of...
No, it won't be gone. It'll just be, if you really need it for some really special things like pharmaceuticals, it'll be worth it.
That was actually another point I wanted to raise, was that when a lot of people talk about oil, they talk about oil in terms of transportation.
Yeah.
They talk about oil in terms of the 3 Mustang GTs that I own. Hey,
good on you, man. Good on you.
I want to get up to 12 or 15, because by then, that's somebody else not driving them. So
how great of you.
Exactly. This is for you guys. But anyway,
we appreciate your sacrifice.
But a lot of people look at oil and that whole petro industry in terms of transportation, but really it's the clothes you're wearing, polyester. It's the food we eat, because most of it's grown with fertilizer that's
it's transported. They ship oranges from Florida to California, as well as oranges from California to Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, they do that.
Mm-hmm. And so when you're talking about oil, you're not talking about driving your Prius versus your Hummer. You're talking about the clothes you wear, the food you eat, the drugs that keep you alive later in life. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And
it won't get so expensive. It won't get so expensive so that we don't extract it for really important things.
Right. But to replace it for the transportation, and the coal and the energy just consumption, that is going to be so incredibly expensive and has such a huge environmental impact. We look at green technologies, quote unquote, but the footprint that they're going to leave behind between the solar farms and the wind farms is going to be enormous.
Enormous. My most recent PhD is Megan Pease, and she was working with Schneider Trucking Company up in Green Bay.
Orange trucks, yeah.
And they wanted her to tell them what's the best way to begin to move in the next 20 years. Because there's a whole bunch of different fuels. Most of them, none of them are completely green by any means. But there'll still be internal combustion engines of some sort. And she was able to take into account the economics, which is always taken into account. But she was taking into account, too, the cost to people with jobs and things like that. And then there was environmental issues as well. So she was able to identify, in general terms, on those multiple criteria, and came up with one particular recommendation for the short term. And somebody else needs to do that so when that craps out, what else do we do? What we need to do is to start looking at
what did she
the large patterns. Which one was it, guys? It was biodiesel 20.
It wasn't biodiesel, because the biodiesel actually came with a larger environmental impact.
Okay, yeah. Which one was it?
It might have been the gas.
Oh, yeah, it was gas. It was whether it was compressed and liquid natural gas. I think they went for compressed natural, went for liquid natural gas, which has its problem. Like, it's under pressure and explodes, and stuff like that. Hydrogen, incidentally, sucks. There's just not enough power in it, and it's, things are going to have to be pretty far gone before hydrogen. But, we need to be working subtly in all of these different ways to get the best shot. The trouble, and don't underestimate business too. I mean, my politics. I mean, I've lived in America 40 years. Feingold would be the only person I could have voted for. My politics are so far to the left, there isn't anyone there. I'm basically a socialist. So when I'm saying get in bed with business, I don't say that lightly. Can we trust them? No, not really.
We can trust them to look out for themselves.
Well, yes, right. But what you then do is to set the context so that looking out for themselves does useful things.
Yeah.
That's what government does. Government should not do the pulling, because government works as a ratchet. It gets bigger and it never gets smaller. You notice that the army hasn't got any smaller since the end of the Cold War? I mean, most of the wars we fight are because we've got a bunch of guys in blue and grey and we wonder what the hell we do with them. I mean, that was the Spanish invasion of the New World, was they just legitimately thrown the Moors out and then they sent their lads over to the New World. And then when Europe stalemated, we had a war over here, which was you guys' early war. And your Indian Wars was the aftermath of the Civil War. So government never gets smaller. So you can't trust government to pull by being big. What government can do is to work as a catalyst. And if you do that, then positive feedback comes into play. And the powerful thing in business is positive feedbacks. And you can trust business to do a lot. But you need this balance between business, which is thermodynamic, and with positive feedbacks, and then government with the appropriate constraints. The Republicans are right, you need to keep government out of production. You must do that. All it needs to do is to work as a catalyst. So there's all sorts of subtleties going on. Yeah?
I've heard it from a few places that Europe is ahead of the U.S. in implementing sustainability or sustainable policies. Is that true in any respect? Or?
Yeah. America is very populist. Europe is used to the government pushing them around. So the planning that needs to be done, Europeans will suck it up. Americans are funny. Don't get me wrong, I like peasants, but you guys are peasants. And the thing about peasants is they're very independent, which is what you and you also there's a whole. I give a whole 50-minute lecture on this. But those peasant values are all well and good. But the interesting thing is that when the army comes through, the peasants roll over and show their bellies. So it's very interesting. Europe is used to being sort of shoved a little bit by government, but I think you can get a push comes to big time shove. I think you guys are going to tolerate all sorts of bizarre things that Europe would view as enormously heavy-handed. So I don't know.
What?
I mean,
Social security.
Cutting back on social security, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, and they should be able to get away with that, and they probably need to.
When the
Which
French
is a
people
real pain
get
in the
asked
butt,
to
'cause I get
retire at
Social
anything
Security,
resembling
so-
a reasonable time, they throw riots. I mean,
Oh yeah, yes,
you
yes, right. I mean, they have riots. We don't have riots here in America. I mean, we do in small sectors of society. Like you do enough bad things to enough black people in an inner city, guess what? But you don't get your middle classes rioting here. Whereas you do. I mean, the French riot all the time. I mean, that's a normal component of doing business. So, better, worse, I mean, I don't know. It's a different creature. Somehow or another, they seem to understand you should tax luxury. And they seem to understand that travel is luxury. And so they don't mind travel being heavily taxed. Somehow they'll accept that. I mean, so it's different. I mean, Britain's being much more energetic with regard to wind than the US. And we've got all those great planes out there. I mean, whoa. We've got enough natural gas to get us over significantly to wind and solar. No, it's not going to be ecologically nice. I mean, Wyoming is going to be one big forest where every tree's out to get the birds. Actually, the birds are actually pretty good at dodging it. It's the bats. The bats are hopeless.
Yeah.
So the environmental footprint is going to be, I mean, you ain't seen nothing yet. I mean,